on there because I was coming
You're so
from
dodgy.
the Sierra Club.
Oh yeah.
But I think while I was there, most people in planning board put any agendas they had, left them outside of the hearing room. And I quit the Sierra Club. I'd been the chair of the IPG, and I quit it when I got the appointment because I didn't want people to think I was bringing an agenda from another group in. And
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
With that, I'll stop communicating because I think Sabrina needs to probably take over our meeting and
run the show.
Yeah.
Well, my dog is actually barking a little, so I'll be quiet for a second. But everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for logging on, and we'll get started here in just a second.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Jim, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
Ronnie.
nice to see you. Our paths have been weaving in and out recently.
Yeah. It'd be good to actually like sit down with you over a beer or something and just
Well, you
catch
only walk by the office like what, twice a day? We can
Yeah.
go get coffee for one of those.
or 15 times. Yeah, I'll bang on your door.
Okay.
Some morning next week, I'll bang on your door.
Yeah, will do. I'll be there.
Cool. And Ronnie's right up the street too. So
Yeah, I haven't seen him around recently.
that's because he just goes upstairs to like his office and downstairs to Spruce and upstairs to his office and downstairs to
Okay.
Spruce. Like,
Yeah, when his office was across the way, we saw more of him. Yeah.
yeah.
Life was hard back then.
Well,
And it's nice to meet the rest of you guys too. Hey, David.
I
Hello.
guess it could be worse than officing above Spruce.
Ronnie, we were just talking about you.
Yep, not bad.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good to see everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Urace.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I'm like seeing all the faces instead of the flyer myself. But
I'll take it down in just a second. I only have 3 slides.
right on.
Hey, Becky. Good to see you here.
Hi, Ronnie. Nice to see you too.
I just printed out my notes for planning board meeting tonight, so
You're all prepared to hop off of this and onto that.
I can concentrate on this first.
You're a champ, David.
So easy. Everybody can do it.
David, it looks cold where you are. Your background is a snowfield. And
Yeah, I figured I'd put up something that would reflect reality this week.
Winter is coming.
That's a funny statement.
Whoops. All right, well, it's about 2 minutes after. We'll go ahead and get started. We are intentionally keeping our info session to just 1 hour. So we'll dive right in and get going. Thank you all for logging on this evening and joining us. We're going to be going from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. My name is Sabrina Sedaris. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm a resident. I live and work here in the community, and I find it really important to voice my opinions and perspectives and to get actively involved in the activities of the community. And I was hoping that this evening we could simply focus our attention for this hour on demystifying our boards and commissions in Boulder, so that folks who are just like me and who are active and engaged have a lot of opinions and perspectives and would really like to shape our community and bring about the visions that you imagine are possible for our local community. I know that's something that many of you want who are on the call tonight. And so this info session is intended to demystify our boards and commissions and to provide you with a little bit of information about what will be necessary to apply and get selected for them, and what kinds of characteristics and qualities are most helpful for members of our boards and commissions. If you're not talking, can you go ahead and mute yourself?
Yep.
Thank you. That will help for the whole evening to run smoothly. All right, perfect. So we're going to hear very briefly from just a few speakers. They're going to keep their comments succinct. And then we're going to spend the second half of our time together in discussion. And everyone on the call will be asking questions and providing comments and stories. And the first person who's going to share this evening is Brian Bowen, who will speak in just one moment. But first, I just want to share this important quote from Dr. King. Just a couple of days ago, we celebrated MLK Day. And this quote, perhaps you've heard it before, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. So many of us hope that the world could be a better place, and engaging locally to make that happen is a possibility that we'll learn about tonight. This is a screen that you might want to take a screenshot of. This website here is really important for everyone on the call. Planning board vacancies and also other openings on boards and commissions. Applications are due by February 21st. And this is the website where you can find all the information, including the application. So with that, I'll stop sharing. That way we can all see each other a little bit better. I also want to let you know that we are recording this session tonight. So afterwards, when we finish, if you know somebody who didn't get to come and they would like this information, please simply send me an email and I will send you the recording. My email is in the chat. All right, at this time, we're going to invite our first speaker, Brian Bowen, a former member of Planning Board, who is going to share a little bit about what it would be like to be on Planning Board. Brian, can you take it away, please?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for asking me to do this. It's nice. So I was on Planning Board for about 8 years. I got appointed to a 3-year term, filling Tim Plass's seat that he left when he went to City Council. And then I got reappointed for a 5-year term. And that ended in March 2020. I think I actually chaired the last live Planning Board meeting. And since then, Harmon and David both had to do it all over Zoom. So whenever I think back to it, it's not over Zoom. It's like the real meat space of life. So you asked me to just talk about a couple different things. Like, so one is just like, what does the board do? So basically, from a city charter perspective, Planning Board does some work that the people of Boulder have asked the City Council to do, and then City Council delegates that work to us. That's sort of the basic structure of it. So we're doing a chunk of work of City Council. And the charter and the land use code lay out boundaries around which or that contain that work for different boards as well as Planning Board. The day-to-day work of Planning Board is, just one second, is conducting reviews of applications. And those applications, those reviews are happening in a public hearing. And the applications include concept plans, which are more conceptual and vague and about the arrangement of buildings on a site, as opposed to a crisp decision. They don't result in a decision. Site plans, which result in a crisp decision that has a lot of characteristics that are defined. Both of those things can be called up or moved to City Council, seen also by City Council. And they also might have the involvement of other boards layered in there as well. We also do use reviews, which is a sort of operational characteristics of businesses that are occupying certain spaces. Things like subdivisions and final plats, a little bit more atypically and a little bit more mechanically. Annexations, which can be a gigantic effort and a lot of negotiation. And things like area plans, which you would help staff to generate through a community engagement process, and then you would be voting on approving them, and they usually get also reviewed by City Council. The other tasks are things like reviewing the updates to the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. creating policy, working on the land use map and zoning changes. There's a lot of stuff built into that whole process. And it's been evolving over the years. We made some pretty meaningful, interesting changes to it last time around. And there's special projects, things like, and I'm not sure what all is going on right now or what's on the table, because we've got a couple city council people who can fill you in on that. But what I saw when I was on planning board, and David overlapped with some of this too, was that we reworked the downtown urban design guidelines. We created Boulder's first energy code and oversaw the demise of the Green Points program, which we also invented, which is really cool. We came with a form-based code, did a bunch of different area plans like Transit Village area plan, stuff like that. Most of TVAP happened before me. The Missing Middle housing project, ADUs, community benefit, which is lingering on, the civic area plan, use tables process, like lots of these special things actually end up being really important opportunities for creating change. And then you as a planning board member are also a big part of what makes those things come to a high level of priority, right? So if you're on planning board and you really want to see the use tables change, you can, for example, like David and I did, work really hard to get them into the high beams of city council, and then you can get staff time associated with it. Another piece about the run-of-the-mill workings of the board is you are also expected to be on another board. So typically, planning board also has ex officio seats, non-voting seats on design advisory board, landmarks board, housing advisory board, greenways, and I think that might be all of them, unless I'm missing one. You guys catch me if I missed one. The way different planning board members relate to that is based on their own personality and experience. Like as a design-oriented architect, I loved being on design advisory board. And it was super fun. I got to work with Lauren on that, which was totally wonderful. And that was a good crowd. And I was able to be a pretty active member in that, right? Whereas like when I was an ex officio member on Landmarks board, I was useful, but it wasn't exactly like my main bailiwick. And so I played a little bit more of a like liaison type role. Like, here's what I think planning board might have said about that. Here's what you need to hear from them. A little bit more transactional. And then another piece that you guys asked me to talk about was like, what's the time commitment? It's hardly anything. It's just a piece of cake. Or
That's BS.
or it might be a little bit more than that. I mean, you really can count on 2 to 3 regular planning board meetings a month, right? Those are 4 to 6, 7 hours if you're unlucky. Then you have the other, like if you're on DAB, well, the design advisory board meets once a month on Wednesdays, and that's during work hours. If you're on a special project like the Missing Middle, well, it might have 2 or 7 other meetings scattered around a several month period. If you're like politically involved and you're like also going to city council meetings and like watching what they say, you know, that's another layer. So I'd say, you know, for me and the way I did it, like it was, you know, candidly like 6 to 8 hours a week added into my overall life. I got really involved in a lot of things, but I'm also really fast at reading packets and drawings. I mean, I think at the end I was able to do like an 800-page packet in like 90 minutes. So, but you gain skillfulness as you get in there. Some planning boards don't read board members don't read the packets at all. Those people will remain unnamed. It is not David. He is diligent. And then in terms of my experience on it, like I gotta say it's hard, you know, but it's also really rewarding. You can find a lot of opportunities to contribute and make change. This town is a small town, and it turns out like your one voice, 1 of 7 on this board, is a meaningful amount of that board, and that board is a meaningful amount of our government. So this is a place where you can really, you know, be of use. And I would encourage you, you know, first off, you do have to have somewhat thick skin. You know, you can't be looking to have your feelings hurt, because it's a little bit of a tougher environment sometimes, more recently, more than ever. But you also have to be willing to speak up and assert yourself a little bit. And what I found, and you know, you guys who are on planning board with me or in the past chime in on this too, but I feel like often if you have something that's like an inkling or a hesitation about things, it's good to say that and say, you know what, I've got a question about this thing. And it turns out almost always the rest of the people on the board are like, you know, I was thinking that same thing too, or I also share that concern. So that's my time. And I will go on record here in front of you fine people saying, I don't regret doing it. I'm glad I did it. I didn't always feel that way for every minute of the whole thing, but.
Brilliant, Brian. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Next, we're going to hear from Lauren Folkerts, who's a current member of City Council. Lauren, can I hand it over to you, please?
Sure. And I am in my office and I left my notes about all the topics that I'm supposed to hit at home. So if I miss anything, please remind me.
I sure will. Thanks.
So I have sort of what the process is going to look like in terms of the applications. I think, you know, as you've seen, they've already released sort of the list of written questions to have written responses to. There will also be an interview portion. We're reworking that right now. So at our last city council meeting on Tuesday, at the very, very end, there's a discussion about what that looks like. Me and Tara are on the committee that's sort of organizing that. But the gist of it is that there will be 2 council members and a staff person that are in a virtual meeting, and we will be asking 2 to 3 questions. It's going to be about 10 minutes of interview. We're also going to allow the applicant to ask a question. And while the council people, we don't always know the inner workings of all the boards and commissions, the staff member that will be with us will be someone who can answer really specific questions about that board or committee as well. But it's still a little bit up in the air, I think, exactly how the questions are going to be picked. But we'll have the questions available ahead of time. It's either going to be 2 questions picked by the council members that are interviewing, or we might, I'm trying to get it so that the applicant can pick their own question from a short list. But one of the things I think that's important, if that's an option, is thinking about what type of thing you're presenting to council, right? So council is going to be looking, and, you know, I've heard a lot of talk about how well boards communicate amongst each other being a really important thing. So I think what Brian said about being able to sort of bring up tough questions and have a thick skin is really important, but we're also sort of looking for a balance of being able to like have tough conversations graciously and with, you know, a lot of empathy with people on the board, so that, you know, to really help move away from just sort of an us-them animosity kind of standpoint to kind of trying to work towards a collective goal together and talking about, you know, what our goals as a community are. So any amount that you can show that in your interviews, I think will be really appreciated. What else am I hitting? Oh, and then part of this is playing into a larger, like, how the roles of the boards and commissions are changing. So there is interest at the council level in having the boards take on more work in some way. I mean, planning board is taking on a lot already. Some boards are really maxed out, but not all boards. And so trying to make sure that we're giving enough interesting work to people to have it, you know, really feel like they're making a meaningful impact on our community, but also maintaining sort of some guidelines around what that should be and being more clear about it. So we're looking at having a council member that's a liaison for every board, so that there's someone that you can have a back and forth with, because as it stands right now, it's a little, there's not that much communication typically between the boards and council itself, although on, you know, when I'm making decisions, I really appreciate all the work that boards do to like write those letters. And, you know, we read all of that very closely, but it's not a personal connection. So we're looking at changing that and having a more streamlined sort of you know, as people are appointed to boards, what it means and what their role is, and kind of having a better intro process for people so that it's more accessible and makes people more comfortable.
Brilliant. And aside from being diligent and reading the packet, which Brian went over, and maybe having a thick skin and being capable of hearing a lot of different perspectives and voicing your own, even if it might be an unpopular perspective. And Lauren, you talked about being able to communicate effectively across multiple boards. Are there any other characteristics of the candidate that you and other members of City Council are looking for? And this could be about planning board. It could also be about housing advisory board or other boards or commissions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, like loving Boulder, I think to a certain extent is like, you know, to be excited about something and something that you want to have our community move towards, I think is a really important piece, just to have that enthusiasm for something. Yeah, I think one of the questions that we're thinking about asking, you know, is about basically like, do you see any opportunity for these boards for the board that you're applying to help us meet our community goals, like, you know, our EDI goals and things like that. And so we are looking for not just what the board currently does, but what it could be.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Really appreciate it. And so you all, we have just heard from 2 architects, but you do not have to be an architect to apply to these boards and commissions. Next, we will hear from somebody who will share an activist perspective. Eric Budd will share next.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, I think I'll keep it pretty short, but essentially the things I want to focus on are essentially that, you know, some of the boards that we've really focused on are planning board, and some of the really, like, I would say that the boards that have a lot of judicial type of power. But I think there are a number of boards which really, I think, are great places to it's not as much about making policy, but it's helping drive the conversation. And I formerly served on the Landmarks board with Ronnie Pelucio. And I think some of the other boards, like Housing Board, Human Relations Commission, Open Space potentially, and a few others, Parks and Rec, you know, in addition to the work of the board, you know, it's kind of seeing yourself as someone whose role is really learning a lot about how the different departments work, like how does Parks and Rec work, for instance, or Open Space, how are these things managed, and also developing relationships with the staff members and really being able to understand the direction of these different divisions within the city, and being able to also like bring these back to, you know, folks in activist groups when, you know, sometimes the work of the board is kind of baked. Like the Landmarks board was really an interesting topic of discussion over the past few days of like, oh, well, why did the city council make this decision and whatnot? And really thinking about, you know, serving on these boards, I think gives a perspective of the long-term kind of change that we want to see in the city, and really having a deep understanding of a particular board, I think it's very helpful to help others in the community think about, well, what kind of policy changes should we be making and bringing to the council eventually to drive change that's needed in those areas. And also, it's a great experience going from serving on a city board at some points to, if folks are interested in running for council at some point or getting more involved in campaigns or anything, it's a really great kind of stake that you're able to say, like, you know, I participated in this way in the city, I volunteered my time, and these are what I learned from it. And I think it's really valuable to the conversation in our community.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we're going to have some closing comments from Aaron Brockett, who is our mayor and who also has himself served on planning board in the past.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Sabrina, and great to see lots of friends here and also some wonderful new faces. I'm glad everyone is here to learn about this. And I'll just say, I'll just really encourage all of you to get involved and consider making an application. That serving on a board and commission it's a really rewarding job and position, and you get to make a real difference in your community. And the action in our society, so much of it happens at the local level. Right, you pick up you look at a news site online or watch something on TV, and it's all about the federal government and the dysfunction there. But your day-to-day life is so much of that is set by what's happening at the local government level. You know, what your city is doing, what your county is doing, and when you serve on a board or commission, like you get to make a real difference on those issues. And so it's a way like. We were talking about what's the right background to have on a day like today. I feel like a dumpster fire is about the right background for most days these days. But with all the challenges that are going on in our society as a whole, there's still the ability to make a real positive difference in our community by jumping in and getting civically involved with one of these. So I did 5 years on planning board. It was incredibly rewarding, learned an enormous amount, and people may say I had a bad effect on the city, but I like to think that, you know, I contributed something positive, and then, you know, learned a lot from it as well. So just really encourage all of you, you know, each of you has a unique background and expertise that you can bring to the table, put it in an application and let that unique perspective of yours shine, because we need people from all different walks of life and backgrounds and levels of expertise and things like that. So please do apply, and I look forward to seeing those applications.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. So for the remainder of our time together, we'll open it up for discussion, and we'll have questions from anyone on the call who would like to ask one, or if you have prior experience with these boards and commissions and you'd like to share a brief anecdote or a story about your experience. What I'd like to ask you to do, if you have something to say, is to put a 1 in the chat. And I'll keep an eye on the chat and keep stack, and I'll do my best to call on people in the order in which they popped a 1 in the chat. However, first I'd like to start with a question that I have received, and I'd like to direct it to David Ensign, who's the current chair of planning board. So someone wrote to me this question: I understand the city council is moving meetings to Thursdays. So what night is planning board moving to? Could you talk about when meetings happen, Dave?
Sure. Yes. So coincidentally, that is on our matters for tonight. We're going to be hearing from our staff what the proposal is. And I believe the spoiler alert is that we're going to potentially switch nights with city council. So that's what I'm expecting to hear. And then each sitting planning board member will be asked if, you know, what impact that might have. But that seems to be kind of the cleanest thing. Now, whether there will be other boards that might get affected, there are a lot of dependencies between board activity and the council. And so there could be some, and I know that staff has been really working this kind of difficult problem of figuring out how to find out all those dependencies and move any other meetings that might need to be moved. But we'll know more after tonight once we hear what staff is going to propose. But my understanding is that planning board would move to Tuesday. Did you have another part of that question, like preparing or anything? No.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what it's like for you to prepare for each meeting?
Well, I probably spend a little bit more time than Brian because I'm not a industry expert. I'm kind of more of a community. So I had to learn the city code, learn the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And I just wanted to highlight just a little bit on what Brian was talking about. A large part of what we do is setting the agenda, you know, helping the city council decide on work plan items, giving recommendations, and helping kind of drive the city's legislative landscape. And we call that legislative work. And that we have a lot of freedom to talk and do things. The other part, which Brian alluded to, is quasi-judicial. So we actually act as judges. And there you have to actually have some expectations, because you can't just arbitrarily pick your pet project and just insert it into a development project that's before you. You have to actually apply the code like you're a judge. So if you're applying to a board, be aware if it's a board that does quasi-judicial, because you'll have to wear two different hats. One is, oh, here are my aspirations when I'm working on legislative stuff. But once you're dealing with specific projects, you have to put on your judge hat and say, regardless of whether I agree with everything in our code, I have to be fair. So that I just wanted to draw that distinction. And one more thing, you talk to the public a lot. So being a good listener is very important. You're going to be listening to a lot of opinions that you may never have thought about. So it's really great for learning and empathy and understanding where other people are coming from. So I would highly recommend, for if you like to listen to what the public is concerned about and what different people's concerns are, board activity is really great for that purpose.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Aaron, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, well, just something that Dave said made me want to add in that those quasi-judicial actions that planning board takes and also landmarks board, just to be clear to folks, and those are what we call criteria-based decisions, in that you're only allowed to vote yes or no or make amendments based on the specific criteria that are set in the code. So, you know, if for example, you saw a building come before you and they proposed that it be purple, and you said, you know what, purple's the worst color ever, it has to be red. You're not allowed to do that. Like, there's no criteria about what color it is. So just be aware that some of these boards do have some limitations in terms of your decision space, and go in aware of that coming into it.
Thank you. That's helpful. You know, speaking of limitations, I have another question in the chat from a member of the call. As a practicing architect, I'm interested in a brief on the conflict of interest policy. Could you talk about who is and isn't eligible to be on planning board or another board or commission because of what they do in the community? While on one hand, it might make them really experienced. On the other hand, it might create a conflict of interest. Brian, do you want to start us off?
I can take that one. Yeah, I was in that position a number of times. And basically the way it boils down to, first off, you have access to the city's attorney's office. You can ask them, you know, before something comes up, like, hey, do you guys think I have a conflict of interest? Can I, you know, even if I feel like I can judge this case, this site review objectively, is there going to be enough of an appearance of impropriety that means I should just actually step aside? And then you have like real conflicts of interest, right? Like if you're getting sued by somebody who's an applicant, you probably really want to like stay very much away from that. I was doing a ton of work for Boulder Housing Partners over the past like decade. And so whenever Boulder Housing Partners had a project, and I care a lot about affordable housing, which is one of the reasons why I work for those guys, I had to recuse myself. So that was a little bit of a weakness for them in working with me. So it was a real thing. And then, so basically the way we looked at it is like, if money was changing hands between us, that was pretty much, you know, or if any of us had the ability to impact the other person's like stream of income or livelihood. But the places where people don't have a conflict of interest, where maybe perhaps they should, as if you're, you know, married to somebody, or if you are close friends with them, or if you're in the same club or political organization advocating for comparable things together all the time.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And Macon has a comment or a question.
Yes, I just wanted to add to what's been said about the planning board. Is it's very helpful for people who love architecture and planning. I was a citizen planner, meaning I'm not a professional at it, but I've always loved books about architecture and about planning. And one of the important jobs of the planning board members is to critique designs and projects that come before them. And it's very helpful if you're familiar with literature and what's going on in planning and architecture. There are so many graphically rich materials, meaning full of pictures and drawings and stuff like that, that you can use as resources to make a positive contribution to the projects. And I'll just say the amount of time I spent on planning board, I carefully tracked it that 5 years. And it's consistent, probably a little more than Brian Bowen spent, because I'm not a professional, but it averaged 34 hours a month. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. So just a reminder, if you put a 1 in the chat, then I will call on you and invite you to speak to the whole group yourself. If you would rather ask a question anonymously or say something anonymously, you're welcome to private direct message that to me and I'll say it on your behalf. I have another question that comes from someone in the group who asks, this person is a student, and so they're thinking about a commitment that they've already made to doing study abroad. However, they would still really like to apply and join remotely and read and prepare remotely. And so the question is, if I'm away for an extended period of time, but still on the board, is that a possibility for my being eligible? Could anyone speak to that? I wonder, Lauren, if you would know about that since you're on.
I think so. Right now, all of the boards are remote still. And I believe that as we go back, they're looking to be combined so that I believe remote would still be an option, but that hasn't been, I think, officially decided yet. So at this point, it might be something worth noting, but I think that accommodations could be made for that.
I'll just add to that if I can. There's that's true. I think there's some chance that the IT folks will put their foot down a little bit and say that running hybrid meetings for every board will be too tough for them. So it's entirely possible that remote will still be possible, for some number of months. But just keep in mind, there's a chance that it could be a deal breaker depending on what the city organization comes back to us with as we make those decisions as we start going back in person.
Thank you.
And I don't know who asked the question, but I would encourage you to apply anyways. I wouldn't negotiate against yourself on that. I would say,
yeah,
see if you can make it work.
Perfect. And if I understand correctly, one of the open slots on planning board will be a 2-year term, and then the other 2 open slots will be 5-year terms on planning board. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, brilliant. And I've also heard it said that it's wise to apply to multiple to increase your chances of being selected. So maybe apply to planning board as well as housing advisory board. Wonder if anybody wants to speak about HAB and just tell us a little about the flavor of that.
Well, I was the planning board ex officio liaison to HAB for a year, and really enjoyed that work. HAB is more of an advisory board than planning board, so a lot of what HAB works on, they can be very vocal in offering up opinions to city council on policy, I think, and looking at various housing initiatives in the city. So I don't know if anyone else in this group has served on housing advisory board. Don't think so.
Just in the same way you did as a
liaison.
ex officio, yeah.
Mhm.
Sabrina, if I could just add about applying to 2 boards, I think it's a really good strategy, particularly if you're most just interested in serving and you have kind of open interests. Just a short anecdote for me, like I applied to the transportation board a few times, and the last time I also applied to landmarks board, and you might realize or guess that transportation board is one of the most popular boards. So definitely like one of my big passions, but I ended up getting selected on the landmarks board, and I had a really great experience and learned quite a bit through that as well. I would say it takes about 50% more time to probably apply to a second board. Some of the questions are kind of overlapped on about you, and then there's going to be a few questions on the application that are specific to that board.
Brilliant. I wanted to go back to something that you said, Aaron, about how maybe there were things that you did when you were on planning board that some people considered to be bad for the city. Can you just share a little bit, either you, Aaron, or anyone on the call who has experience You know, obviously a lot of people in Boulder care a whole lot about housing, and sometimes our opinions and our wants and desires and visions might be at odds. Could you just share a little bit more, maybe a story or an example from your life around how you developed that thick skin? Like, what do you do when you were just a normal person living your life? Suddenly now you're serving the community and people have really strong opinions about what you do or don't do. What do you do with that? And how do you develop that thick skin? I wonder if you could talk a little about that.
Sure. Well, I am still a normal person living an everyday life, you know, just also have a civic role. But yeah, it is, these are controversial topics. You know, we like to say that development proposals are a full contact sport here in the city of Boulder. And people feel very passionately on all different sides of, you know, what kind of buildings should get built, where should they go, how tall should they be, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that when you're in the thick of it and casting votes, right, you're going on record with a vote and a statement, and maybe it gets in the paper, and then you start getting angry emails from one person or another about, you know, decisions that you've made. And the thing is that you just have to not take it personally. I think first and foremost, you have to make sure that you're making a decision that you're comfortable with in your own brain and heart and mind. And as long as you are doing that, then you can feel comfortable in your own self. And then just recognize that it's not a personal thing, that when people feel like you've cast a vote they disagree with, that they're expressing an opinion. We all have different opinions on things, and you just have to be able to let that go. I'll just mention a specific one, like what flashed in my mind when I said that was there's the building on the west end of the Pearl Street Mall, just southwest of the end of the Pearl Street Mall, which used to be the Daily Camera building for those of us who've been around long enough to remember that. And so there's now a building that's, you know, about 6 years old, and there was a 4-3 vote to approve that building on planning board, and I was in the 4-person majority. And as that building was getting constructed, oh my goodness, like the number of people that wrote me were like, how dare you, this is the worst thing ever, you know, you've made the city a worse place, all that kind of thing. But eventually when I ran for council, people spread rumors that I had single-handedly like done a backroom deal to make that building happen, which is, of course, was absurd. But anyway, so when you make decisions like that, sometimes people get upset, but you just have to be able to live with that and move on. And again, just be comfortable with your own decisions, and it works out.
Thank you so much.
I want to add a little bit to it, because I think actually my experience was much like Aaron's, but I think I don't feel like I did receive a lot of flack from individual folks, but I think in our planning world here, as an architect, I think people who are going to like yell at Aaron wouldn't yell at me because they're like, he's an architect, he just votes for everything, or he likes growth, or you know, there's like this like assumption about what I was that was different than what Aaron was, even though we were on the planning board at the same time and voted on that same exact project the same exact way. No one ever told me anything about it. So maybe they just assumed I was a lost cause. The other piece is you get feedback from the world that's also positive. You know, so people out there, they watch planning board meetings, and I would like walk through the grocery store and some random person who I'd never met before would say, oh my God, I saw you on planning board. That was great. You were like the voice of reason. Thank you so much. I was like, okay, that's great. And then also other times, like I would talk to friends or people who understand the political context or activists and say like, hey, you know, I feel bad about that vote I made Thursday night. I rolled with everybody else on it. I saw it wasn't going to pass. I didn't want to stick my neck out any further. So I just went ahead and voted no on it. But I kind of feel like maybe I should have like taken a stand and said a thing, you know? And sometimes people would say, no, you were right. Keep your head down. The nail that has its head stuck up is the one that gets whacked with the hammer. Don't do that. But like, or other times they're like, no, it would have been really, really helpful if you had voted no on that. And this is like one little bit. It's important to understand what your context is in the larger political scheme. As a planning board member, things you say might be important to tee up something that somebody else needs to say on city council, or on Landmarks board. So you actually play a wider, like a role in a wider ecosystem of conversation, of discourse, than just that one meeting. So that's another little drop in there.
Thank you. That's really important. David.
And I'll just add one thing. So I think that in this, in our political discourse, there's a lot of concern about people don't actually talk to people they disagree with. And this is, I found it actually is a really incredible opportunity. Now I'm really involved in the nonprofit world. So I work with a lot of people who come from all different viewpoints on what Boulder's future should be. And some of our biggest donors might disagree with a vote that I did on planning board. And so then I have to, I've had to figure out, well, what do I do about this? We have this important donor and I'm on the board, and, you know, so it really gives you an opportunity to kind of be an adult and isolate that one thing and then stay friends on the other thing. And both of it, almost every case, I think it's been kind of reassuring to know that most people kind of know how to compartmentalize a little bit. So I've had pretty good experiences with that, but I'm usually pretty aware when I have I can think of several donors to nonprofits that I've worked with who have opposed something, and I've always been kind of like had my eye on that. So, you know, think about that, depending on how many people you know in the community, how you can kind of you kind of raise your level of being able to talk to people, even if you don't agree on a particular thing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And next, I just want to encourage those of you. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I touch on something Brian said? So, you know, I think being on a board, I didn't realize how true this was, but being on council, you know, for instance, with planning board, we see and get sort of final approval on a lot of planning board decisions. And even if you aren't in the majority on a vote, you know, just having you know, when I'm reading through my packet, knowing that a vote was unanimous or that one person dissented, and sort of what that dissent is about, you know, even just one person not agreeing is going to make me more curious and kind of look into things in a different way. And so that's always like, yeah, sometimes I think people feel like one vote doesn't matter, but even in the case that it doesn't change the outcome of that particular board, it still can have a really important impact.
Nice. That sounds like what Brian said a little while ago. Your voice, a meaningful amount of our local government, since we are a small place. That's really important. At this time, we have less than 15 minutes left. And so I really want to encourage those of you who are on the call, because you would like to apply to planning board or another board or commission. I'd really like to protect some space for your questions or your comments, even if they're only partially formed. So if you are in that boat, I would especially like to move you to the front of the line for your question.
Sabrina, John put a question in on the timeline. I just want to say that I know that the deadline for the applications is the 21st of February. If you look at the Boards and Commissions site, I believe it does have the timeline. The interviews will take place in, I want to say the early March time frame and I think the first board meeting that you'd be expected to go to is the first one in April for your particular board if you get selected. So it's really important because it goes fast. It's actually a little bit less fast this year. I've had some people get really surprised and they had a vacation planned or something. So yeah, being aware of the timeline is important.
You know,
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, David, you're the chair, so perhaps your word is the one we should trust. But I did just want to mention that Cindy Spence gave me some info about the timeline, and actually hers is even faster than yours. So shall I throw it out there in case her earlier dates?
Sure, I was basing it on what Cindy told me in our agenda setting meeting this morning. So, but maybe there's something else that I don't know.
What I wrote down is interviews will be done by City Council the first 2 weeks in March. Appointments will be made on March 15th. And so if you're selected, your first planning board meeting would be on March 17th.
I actually Yeah, I've heard the same thing as Dave has, that
Okay.
that appointments, the current board members' terms will last through the end of March. The new board members' terms will start at the beginning of April.
Brilliant. Thank you. That clarity is important.
That's interesting. That's new.
Yeah, last year
It is new.
they actually transitioned after the first meeting in March, but there's a little bit of a breather this year.
I mean, I definitely watched a few people get appointed and then they're like, when's the next meeting? And they're like, tomorrow. Tomorrow is your first meeting on planning board and here's your packet. And can you come tomorrow to the city's attorney's office to get your onboarding? Good luck.
Oh, and that's a good point, Brian. After the decision is made before that first meeting, there could be an orientation to go to and a meeting with the attorney. So it's good to kind of keep a flexible calendar and not plan to go to Europe for 2 weeks in March or April this year.
Brilliant. Thank you. All right. Once again, is there anyone on the call who is actually planning to apply and you have a question, an observation, or a comment? I want to make sure you have an opportunity to share that.
Yes, please. My name is Selassie Atiasi, and I've been curious about the kind of relationship that exists between city council and boards. Like, I just wondering how, what's the regular relationship like? Basically, that's my question.
Thank you.
I'll speak historically as quickly as I can. I didn't have a lot of interaction with city council unless I sought it out. It wasn't my experience that even when I was chair on planning board, that city council members would reach out to me and either try to, push me one or the other, or so I felt like there was a little bit of space between the two, but also I'm not like a super politically entrenched person. And also probably, again, like painted with that architect brush, like lost cause. I don't know. But I think that might change with the implementation of a liaison to the board, which I think would be a really positive move. That seems like you'd then have one person, you're like, I'm supposed to talk to Lauren. And that's really good, because then it's not just like, I'm going to talk to the one who I think is the most approachable or who might like me the most, or the one who's my neighbor, or things like that.
Lauren Folkerts, would you like to add anything to help answer Selassie's question?
Sure. So, I mean, mostly it's in the same line of what Brian just said. I don't think currently, when I was on design advisory board for 5 years. And although we had one very controversial meeting where we actually had 2 city council members in attendance and they spoke, beyond that, we had very limited direct contact with city council. Again, it was mostly we produce sort of a report based on our meeting, and if they have questions, they might ask, but almost never did. But we are looking to, again, create more consistency and better dialogue. So we hope to be rolling that out at probably the end of this year. We're going to start kind of trying to tackle it and figure out how exactly it would work, probably mid-year.
And I'll just add that traditionally staff has taken care of a lot of the heavy lifting with regards to communication between council and boards. So in our packets, we'll see links to what council had said about something that we're looking at. If you want to get in the past, again, with this liaison thing, I'm very happy to hear that, because we kind of put that in our end of year letter suggestion like that. So that's really great to see. But I will say that in the past, if you wanted to get more nuance, you almost had to go watch the city council meetings to see everything that was said. Because you sometimes with memos, you don't really get all the nuance.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, I'm dropping in the chat the link for where you actually apply to planning board and all boards and commissions. And again, the deadline is February 21st. Any other questions, comments, observations, especially from folks who are planning to submit an application? All right. Well, we have about 8 minutes left, and Macon, you had wanted to share something. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I have. Thank you. And it follows on what I heard from Lauren, that the council may be shifting more work to the boards during this next couple of years. And so I have a question. I hope Aaron is still on. Aaron and David could probably comment on this, but when the Housing Advisory Board was put together in 2015 and 2016, the reason it was done is because council wanted to have a board that explored new ideas about housing. And then about a year after that board was put together, it came up with a group of housing suggestions and ideas that it wanted to explore. This resulted in a letter from the city council to all of the boards, all 20 of them, that basically said boards are only supposed to work on what the council tells them to work on. It sounds like there has been quite a change in that, but I'd like to have a comment from the two council members on the line with us about whether that marching instruction is likely to be changed.
Aaron, I think you should go first on this one since you have a longer history.
Sure. And well, I think in the early days,
and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but I think I got it about right.
Yeah, I think in the early days of the Housing Advisory Board, there hadn't been a lot of direction from City Council about exactly what to work on. And the board started exploring a lot of different possible directions to go in. There was the council majority at the time who felt like they were getting into things that they shouldn't, and so their scope was kind of reduced, which I thought was a shame, honestly. So I think the current council is going to be looking for more ideas rather than fewer from the Housing Advisory Board, because I think that they think deeply on this topic, and we can use their assistance. So I think we haven't specifically discussed it exactly how that's going to work, but I think this current council is going to be interested in hearing more rather than less from that board. So there's some good opportunities there. I'm actually meeting with the board chair in a few days to talk to him about what they've got on their agenda and directions they might go in. While I have the floor, do you mind if I just throw in one other thing, Sabrina?
Please.
We've been talking a lot about planning board, which it's a great board and it does a lot of important work. It is also very competitive typically, right? Even with 3 seats, it's not uncommon for us to get 12 or 15 or more applicants. So just to reiterate the advice that some folks have given is to look at all the boards at the city and look for different ones that match your interests, and applying for a couple of boards is a good approach. And so don't get too fixated on planning board, I'd say.
Don't forget about Design Advisory Board. It is by far the most fun.
I have to leave to go to planning board now, but I'll just throw in, Lauren, that I am currently the liaison to the Design Advisory Board, and it is fantastically fun to hear all the language that people say about architecture.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving. Take care. Thank
Bye,
you.
David.
See you, David.
Bye, David. Good luck tonight.
Thanks.
That was a perfect setup because someone just asked in the chat a question, can you say more about what the Design Advisory Board focuses on? So can somebody with experience just say a few more sentences about that, please?
Yeah, so the Design Advisory Board looks at, so it has a weird purview. It doesn't normally see things under what it was originally set up to see. Usually it sees things that either on the recommendations of staff or planning board, where they're having sort of difficulty deciding if something meets the guidelines that Boulder has, because basically Boulder has very fuzzy rules about what things should look like. So the Design Advisory Board deals a lot with what these sort of larger downtown projects look like, mostly.
Perfect. And there is just one more question in the chat. Someone wanting a little bit more information about the transition from online Zoom or Microsoft Teams meetings to shifting back to in-person. So is anyone able to say a little bit more, perhaps a timeline for when that is planned to occur. Anyone have a crystal ball, and can you tell us about the Omicron numbers and when they'll go down?
It's all TBD. There have been no firm decisions made, so it's going to be based on the public health guidance and case and when cases go down. But we haven't set exact thresholds either, so it's going to be a bit of a judgment call as we hopefully get out of this terrible phase of the pandemic.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I would, if you guys are trying to get a sense of what it's like to do the meetings, like you can watch these meetings, right now on Zoom on a different link, or you can go back and watch previously recorded ones. All of the Zoom ones are there, but also all the live ones are there. And I would definitely say that, like, I got called back on planning board to do a public hearing last summer, and doing it on Zoom was really, really different than doing it in person. So there's a pretty stark difference there. And I think doing it in person has all the benefits of, the obvious ones that you would expect. So.
Perfect. All right. So just one last reminder, as we get ready to finish the call and hang up, this has been recorded. So I know there was at least one person who's interested in applying and couldn't be here this evening. That person and anyone else who is in your life who might want to receive the recording on Zoom, just send me an email and I'd be happy to send that over. I really want to thank all of our speakers and all of you for joining us. And I'll just share this quote to close. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That's a quote from Margaret Mead. So thanks everyone for your interest in potentially applying, and thanks to all of you who have already served and are serving in these roles. Really appreciate you helping our community improve.
Thank you.
Sabrina, thank you for putting
Good
this
night, everyone.
together.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for coming.
Wish we were all having beers together tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Cool. Thanks so much, Sabrina. That went really well.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. Thank you so much for helping. It was great to organize with you.
Yeah. Now the next thing will be who's actually applying. Let's start keeping
Yep.
track of that. So yes.
That will be the next thing, won't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch for your time, and I'll see you later. Have a good evening.
All right. Sounds good. You too.
All right. See ya.
Bye.